ARPI is the way everybody else does web development these days in modern development environments. So the beauty about Delphi, of course, is that you can make it look like anybody else's because it's so extensible. So we can do functional style, we can do procedural style, we can do object style, we can do anything else. So we can make it look like anybody else's language. So one of the things I thought a couple of years ago was lacking was exactly this. So what ARPI is basically, you may have heard of JavaScript and TypeScript. I'm not sure if you have heard of that new technology. Invented the same year as Delphi. And it's there's a stack they call in fact, I've forgotten what it's called. I've forgotten what the stack's called. But anyway, so at the back end, we have a thing called Express, which runs on Node. So Node Express. So what ARPI is the interface from Express, web development environment from Node, implemented in Delphi. So it looks the same. It looks very similar to that. It has the same function names. Some of them are non-functional in Delphi because the asynchronous programming isn't so flashy just yet, and that's actually the focus of where I'm thinking about tonight. And so to give you an idea of what the kind of things are going on. So Microsoft has. Just after we did the ARPI 2019 symposium, Microsoft thought, oh, that's a good idea. So they came up with it as well. So this is code. So you can run a web server with this many lines of code, right? So this is visual. This is C# with what they're calling their minimal API. So it's basically the same as what I did with the Node Express implementation. I took that, put it in, they did the same, very similar, slightly different wording. So they've got, I think they're like this builder thing, which they have for their ASP.NET Core, but essentially the same thing. And they actually had this other style that's even closer to the Node Express syntax. So if we compare that with the ARPI code, I've got loads of space. Of course I have. You can see we can pretty much do, pretty much line for line. In fact, even if we used inline definitions, we could even grab that, move it down here, and do that. Just get the syntax right here. So we're looking almost the same there. So var app, oh yeah, the same. We want to say that is the particular interface we're using there, and we're saying new. Up here they say something similar, but basically, getting a new one of those. So they're mapping get. So we don't have to say map get. We just say get. When I get the slash, I want to have a lambda expression. So this is a lambda expression in the same as an anonymous function in Delphi, saying a procedure that accepts no, sorry, actually this is a function that returns no, that accepts no parameters and returns the code to be returned to the web browser. And in the ARPI code, it's pretty much the same thing, although our lambda expressions are not as clean and tidy. So we still have to define the whole. So lambda expression and anonymous function is exactly the same thing. We have to put procedure begin, end, but in C# and most other languages now have this shortened syntax where you just go arrow function. So no parameters, but we're accepting the parameters in our instance. But essentially that's it. And then the web page would run. So exactly the same style. Now, everybody's hoping to have, I imagine you wanted to have a look at ARPI working. I can't do that, unfortunately, because I put all this licensing stuff in 2 years ago, and those all expired, and I didn't get time to do that on my laptop. But fortunately, that's not the focus of discussion. What we actually want to talk about is, so the interest was in the functional programming, and so
kind of tangential to that is that you'll see that we're not using here. So our basic go-to here, basic go-to is our functions. They're not class. We don't make a class to implement our endpoint. It's because there's no real need. Mostly what happens is you create a anonymous function. You can make it non-anonymous. You can call a static method as well. Doesn't really matter. And so if we get rid of that now, just back up, make this bigger. We can get away. We can add new endpoints by just going down here and saying, okay, we could do another get, and that would be do something else. And
so basically each query is what you put against the get statement.
That's it. So if you do a get, you can also do post as well. So instead of a get, you could say post instead. And in fact, what you can say is you can even, although I must admit I've forgotten the syntax a little bit, but you can actually basically say post or get. But I actually forget the syntax of how to do it. Yeah. But yeah, so and so this is the style of approach, is that you just have your endpoints all on one page, and say, okay, I'm going to do this, and then when you want to branch out, you can head off and do some kind of function which will run as a Lambda expression inside of this. So it'll hit here, and then you can go off, do anything you like. Now, what's quite important though is in most other language environments, this is done asynchronously. So it's using the async await architecture, which you may or may not have heard of. In Delphi, it's fairly rare, but and we do have it. A kind of bizarre implementation, I've got to admit. So there's the thing called the parallel task library, and another one called the asynchronous the APL library. So both of those things are what is in my brain at the moment. So, so I'm thinking about how to do those things. And so what I want to do is open up this web API interface here and just show you. Where are we going? I'm going over here, and I'm going to source. I'm hoping I'm going to the right spot. It's been a little while. Implementations, interfaces. And is there anything in there? Did I open project? Idiot I am. I just meant open. Component source interfaces. That's better, thank you. So HTTP, and if I go to this interface, that's HTTPS indicator, it's a web server configuration, and where I'm trying to go is, so here's the RP HTTP interface. So some RRP has something to do with remote procedures, but I can't, it's lost in the mist of time why I thought RRP was the thing. Anyway, that's how we got RP. That's how we got the name of RP, it comes from RRP, but I don't remember why. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm pretty sure, when I came up with that. I thought, RRP, that'll be it. Yeah, that'll make sense. And then in the morning, I couldn't remember why the hell I picked it. But anyway, something to do with remote procedures. Now, so inside here, there was one method which is not immediately obvious to me. That was a bit of a downer. I was thinking it was in here. Okay, is it somewhere else? Certificates, web configuration, custom web configuration. Okay, it's not there, which was a bit of a pity. Okay, what I was looking for is that I had, I'm sure it's here somewhere, is there are synchronous and asynchronous methods. So are we needing to know what asynchronous, how asynchronous calls work?
there's blanks on okay silent. So I'm going to say yes. We're going to need to understand what an asynchronous call is. Might just have to talk to it. I haven't got a page that I can describe, but essentially, when you have a call come in from the web page, what we used to do, and certainly what Indy does now, and various other implementations, I think standard Unix ones, is you have a new thread for every person who comes or every connection that comes in. That's certainly what Indy does. Now, the problem with threads is they don't scale hugely well, because in truth, your computer that has 4 logical processors, can only do 4 threads at a time. So yes, you can have 100 threads running, but the processor can only actually do 4 threads at a time because it's only 4 processors. So what happens in the architecture of the CPU is there's a queue of processors coming on, threads that have to be run. And so each thread gets a go of the CPU for a certain amount of time. And if your processor is a bit longer and exceeds the time that's allocated by the operating system for that, sometimes about 300 milliseconds, something like that, what the process has to do is stop, copy the contents of where you are up to in that thread, copy it off to some caching system, whatever the system is implemented, and then get somebody else's thread, puts it on and starts running it. And then when theirs is finished, you can pick yours back up, copy it back on. Now that copy swapping
doesn't copy, it only copies the pointer to it.
Well, not quite. That's, depending on if you've got a large memory object or whatever, depending on how the architecturally it's implemented. So my understanding is that lots of the things get copied actually off the CPU's working space into cache, into CPU cache.
Yeah, so and that's all of the CPU registers. Yeah, they're located here.
That's it. So you've got to make a map of that, and some of those registers are now like 64-bit ones, and they're big, and that's very, very expensive. So if you just keep throwing hundreds of threads, what you'll get is to a point where what they call an architectural speak in CPU land, they call thrashing, which means that the CPUs are 90% copying crap backwards and forwards, and only 10% actually running new processes. So that's why you need to manage your threads. So you use a thread pool and a queue. So so for the Delphi one, the parallel task library actually does that. So you can just keep giving it tasks, and they'll get queued nicely onto that, and won't just say like the operating system won't try. There's jiggery pokery going on, right? So it's still got to run them, obviously, but it runs them kind of, if you think of it like if you had a slot machine, it's where that person does get a stack of coins and you go, brrr, you drop all the coins in. I'm sorry, I couldn't. Could you see what I did there? Yeah, as opposed to dropping coins in like this. So you can drop coins in backwards, one at a time like that, or you can go brrr, chuck them all in. So that's kind of what the purpose of the parallel task library is. And some of the things that can happen, for example, is the CPU may be busy, but a lot of the time your thread isn't doing anything because it's waiting for some IO operation. And if you use an asynchronous programming style, and in things like C# and even TypeScript or whatever, you can just use the async keyword, saying I'm going to run this method asynchronously, and then it will wait for IO things to happen. And when by what we mean by waiting, it'll actually say, okay, I'm waiting, and it'll give the operating system, whatever's driving the architecture, the chance to run something else on the CPU while your IO is running. So we don't have to worry about it too much as programmers. We just have to put the async keyword on there and know that it works better. Okay, so it works. So using asynchronous programming is
it's more efficient and scales better than using thread after thread after thread after thread. So, so I'm thinking over the last few weeks, those things that I could do to make the RP follow that asynchronous style. Given that the implementations of asynchronous in Delphi is unless I'm reading it wrong, it's not there, right? It's just not there yet.
But I understood it. You have a thread.
Yep.
In Delphi.
Yes.
And as soon as he wants to do IO, that thread clock stops and the next one takes over.
Yes.
And if you put a sleep in, the thread stops and the next one takes over.
Yes. So if you put that is generally so, but there are nuances. There are nuances, which essentially that's correct. But managing what gets put onto the pool is this. It wasn't developers who did this. It was like system architects, CPU architects. They're like, yeah, some other person. It wasn't developers, right? They come up and said, look, you should be doing this, and then the language and the compiler and everything does the things that makes this easy for us. So we don't generally have to.
I mean, these multiprocessor CPUs, they're very new.
Yes.
I mean, in the last 10% of my working life,
yes.
Well, maybe not quite.
No, maybe a bit more than that.
40%.
No. So yeah, so this is the problem. So one of the and the other thing. So that's the threading thing, which is an issue.
The blocking versus non-blocking.
It's not even that. It is. Yes. Well, yeah.
If you've got blocking IO, your thread stops.
Yes, it stops. Yeah.
And you can't do anything in that thread until that IO is finished or timed out.
That's it. Yeah. So it's just a better way to manage it. And that's all I care about in particular. And I have watched many a video and thought I understood it. But I always have to keep watching them again. Just go, how is this kind of different? And it is worth doing. So there's a couple of videos which I'll try to find the links for, which explain this far better than I do. There's the actual, proper computer engineers who know about this stuff far better than me. But anyway, so that's that thing. The other one is if the functional programming approach, and the story that I again have heard, and I'm sure is true. Important people have told me that in the times when multiprocessors first started coming out, so like this is 92, 3, something like that, right? Yeah. So 30 years ago, everybody was saying, "Oh, this is awesome." Well, suddenly our programs will go 3 times faster because we got that many more processors in there, and so 8 CPU processor machine should now get things done 8 times faster. Just it went at exactly the same speed, and everybody's going, "What the hell is going on here?" Except all the functional programming language people are going, "No, mine goes 8 times faster. You've done something wrong with yours." So, the thing about object-oriented programming, and there's many a proponent of, quite significant people in the world who think, yeah, maybe it wasn't such a good idea. Because the whole management of state, which is the big issue with classes, is we spend half our time saying, oh, we have to stop this and make sure that this is protected in case another thread comes along and does it, but you can't because it's hidden behind there, and then we have to get some kind of thread pooling and whatever. And the point is that you've got state that can be updated. And then you're trying to carry it around.
2 threads updated state. Right?
That's it. Yeah. So you've got to use some kind of blocking. So again, this comes down to the issue of performance and efficiency. Is if one of your threads stops doing work because it's been told to wait, hang on, I'm doing something.
And it's waiting for another thread that's waiting for it.
Yeah, that's it. So you can get to a point where your application runs far slower than you would expect.
Stops.
Yeah, or stops because it's being blocked and so what functional programming does is that's never really an issue. Because there's no state to manage. It's you have a function, and that function will always return the same result regardless of what happens. It doesn't do anything outside the function. It doesn't try to sneakily do things so that your application's running on fine and you call some function that says do A, but it really does A and C, B, and D, and E, and then sneakily comes back and does it. So if you adopt the functional programming style, you never really get to a point where there's shared state that has to be managed by blocking or whatever. So if we this modern style of web development that we're trying to emulate with API uses those two things. So asynchronous method calls, and also using in a functional style where you don't share state. Now, sometimes it's impossible, and if you get a file or you got to update some file, sometimes you're going to hit it, but it's best to try and avoid if you can. And one of the things about if you create a class, well, you got state. Otherwise, why have a class? So if you're not going to store the data with it, why do you have a class? You just have a group of static methods or something. Sure.
Yeah, but I mean,
you can keep things tidy.
Typically, what I would do is I would have an object would only be able to be operated on by one thread, and that's you contain it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, any kind of approach that does that, but functional programming kind of gives it to you for free. So you don't really have to think about it too much. So those are the two big areas, and that's why I'm saying it's kind of the functional programming thing that we discussed. I was going to present is kind of tangential to that. Yeah. So you can use functional programming approaches and using lambda expressions or anonymous functions. That's the way we can apply.
This. Can we just go back a little?
Sure.
So where does API sit? So you've got an internet. Does it actually take the work from the port or from the
yes
web server, or
so
it is the web server itself?
It is a web server. Yeah. So API is web server. That is so all the features are. So the main features of API are in particular that it's a web application that you can type 3 lines of code, it's up and running securely with HTTPS, automatic redirection, and pluggable architecture that you can extend as much as you want. So it's very similar to many of the other styles I suppose it's not the actual web server, so to speak. What it does is we have an implementation of a server, which is the Indy one currently.
So you're using the Indy server?
Yes, so it implements this IRRP interface, right? So there's another web server that I could also use, which is the HTTP daemon on Windows, which is the same one that iOS uses, for example. And so that one, if you wrap that with this same interface, so in the code where I say here in the project, I said, I'm using the API and I'm going to go configure. And when I go to the configure page, I said, make me a T-Web Indy API web server.
Right, yeah.
So there's no reason why I couldn't say, make me a HTTP.
You haven't re-encoded all of the HTTPS and all of it.
No. So yes, I just grabbed that. So that's so it's an implementation of that Express framework, if you like, which is all interface, and you can use whatever method you like. So some of the things you get with API are that Now, I did this demo at the 2019 symposium where it's the architecture of the API web request is what's called a request response pipeline. So a request comes in and things work on it until it gets to the end of the application and says, look, there's nothing, I've got nothing else.
That gives you the-
And you can, and it will go back out again. So you basically have a chain of methods which say, go do the next thing. And when you get that, do something and pass it back to whoever called me. So you have a chain of things that go in there. So for example, if you want, say you've got a class in your code where you are working, where you want to work upon the values that somebody sends you. In RP, what you don't do anything with JSON or XML or anything like that. What you do is you have what's called a middleware that goes into that pipeline that says, okay, when I see XML coming in here, the XML middleware says, oh, I know how to turn that into the object that you want. So it will do that job. So you don't have to worry about in your implementation whether someone's sending you JSON or XML or web forms or whatever. You just get a class, and by the time it gets to the code where we're going to execute it here, this IRRP request already has the object that you want in it. So it eliminates all of that, worrying about, have I got, what type is it? Do I need to convert? Do I need to pull anything out of the JSON code? It just eliminates that altogether.
So these requests are like gets and puts.
Yeah. So they're normal HTTP requests, but by the time you get it in this place where you're going to work on it, you presumably put the right middleware in place to handle the kinds of messages that you want. So if you want to have a YAML, you want to receive YAML data, that's fine. If you want to read,
that information's all contained in the parameters you're passing in.
Yeah, yes, that's right. So you would expect that your response. So this is an example of where it's uncontrolled, right? So, and there is the other style, which I'll bring up the page. Now, I'm sorry that I didn't actually have this working because again, I wasn't the focus of the meeting wasn't actually this per se. But anyway, let's open this up here and go into here, and we can say, so this remote RPC stuff, so remote procedure calls, exactly what I was just talking about here. So what you can do is you can create a class of any type. Doesn't have to be descended from T-Web anything, or it's just make a class. Just make a class. That's it. And so when the data comes in, you can say, okay, I'm going to post this message. Doesn't use all these kind of things that you need to worry about. For doesn't worry about that. You receive the request in the GET approach, or you can say you can just expose your class. You can expose the class to be populated by the incoming request. So for example, here. Okay, I'm trying to find the right thing here. Where am I going? Where's a good example? Okay, I'm still trying to get it here. Okay, here's an example. So, so you just say create a class of my type, and then you say you add it onto a route, and then you put in some rules about whether it can be. Do I accept gets or quotes? Do I, what security level is it? Can anybody get to this? Is it public, or do you have to have, what kind of security do you have to have? And you say, okay, are the fields exposed in the class? Are the properties exposed in the class? Are the methods exposed in the class? And then I forgot what that one's. I'm terribly sorry. And again, I forget the last two things, but essentially you can say create a class, and you will receive requests as a remote procedure call directly on that class. You don't have to you don't have to have a special implementation. You just make a class, expose it. That approach is. There's various reasons why that is a good and bad idea. So if you know what you're doing, it's all quite a good approach. But the other thing is that you can add any kind of middleware along the way. So that includes what kind of authentication is going to be happening. And again, the idea is that you plug in the tools in the pipeline before it gets to the code, and your code will then work. And if you say, okay, I need to add some other kind of authentication, you just plug in the middleware for that, does that kind of authentication. So it's a whole tool set which eliminates all of the things that I think are hard, really. So in the way that we have been doing web development in Delphi before.
So is the aim to produce web pages or to produce data over?
It does both. So yeah, so it does mine. So there's so there are quite good videos which you can watch if you go to the link getting started here. If we watch one of them now, I'm not sure how well it'll go over the Zoom meeting, but
We should go.
okay, so we can if we play this one. So I think there's a 50-second. Well, that's a 9-minute one, but there's a 50-second one that gives you a quick. So that's. I'm sorry, that's probably you're not hearing that very well. There is a. Yeah. Anyway, I explained the whole thing, and that's actually the wrong video. For I'm looking for the 50-second one. Stop. Shh. Yeah. So that's that, and the other thing is why this is a little bit disjointed. This presentation, which I must admit is so. Because again, what wasn't what I intended to display to show, and because I have absolutely no interest whatsoever in the last year and a half. I think one guy in Germany has it, and he's using it, and he thinks it's awesome, and he works with his project. And I've never heard from him again. So apparently his project's working pretty well, but I haven't heard from anybody else. So I've basically said, unless I get some more interest, it's going to get less. Well, it certainly hasn't had any attention in the last year.
API is server side, or is it both?
It is no, it's definitely server side.
Server
side, yeah. So it gives you the web server that eliminates all of the hard things. Now, the other thing that it has is also maybe we could quickly watch the where is it? So this one broker middleware one. So it actually, you can plug web broker in, and so I'll try and play this video. Hopefully it's still okay at the back end, but otherwise you can see it. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Let me just. Okay, I'm trying to. What are we going to do?
Mute your computer for a second.
That sounds good.
Okay, going to mute.
Is it meant to be muted right now?
/RP. And the one we're going to go look at is just the web broker middleware.
You'll have to stop the screen share.
Okay, stop sharing.
Am I doing something?
Did you get the chat?
Have the screen share yet? Oh, sorry, I hadn't thought it through.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, this is nothing like the presentation I was planning, but still, I'm happy to go with whatever you.
Well, I was thinking we could change the plug over to your machine, but that might break.
Yeah, that could be a problem. Yep. Okay, so anybody else can play it on their own machine, of course. So we want to go to the expand the middle section. So the little arrow in the middle. Left, down, up. Yep, that one. And then go to supporting legacy applications. I hate that term legacy, but it seemed like the only one that would fit. And that's the video with there. RP web broker. So apologies, everyone else. So if you got the link there, you can watch it yourself. That's fine. Just to give you an idea, this is one of the things you could we can do, for example.
Hey guys, Glenn here. Just doing a quick video on web broker. You know, people have asked me, I've got a lot of work invested in my web broker module.
Can everybody hear that okay?
I use that in Army or what the point of using it in Army. And I just tell them you can just use it immediately. No, I really mean it just immediately. It just works immediately. So it's easy, looks sure it can't work, but it just does. Let me take you through this video to show you how easy it is.
This is good.
Let's go to our existing web broker module. This is just a test one that I created entirely for the purposes of the video. It is a single module with 2 actions.
Great out there.
The other is hello to children. So standard works application message that you get by default. In your web broker test.
One is dragon.
Start so.
Right, so you can still, you can make it out.
Actually enable the SSL for this. Again, we go to the SSL and we don't get to the correct name so this certificate works correctly. So you can put that in manually. And then Unity, which is the name of the certificate, which was RP generated certificate, just used in this web module, and obviously everything is working as we expect.
So see the importance. There's a little bit of effort, right, to get the
next message is,
HTTPS working on a web broker.
Web broker, and the endpoint is hello, and the actual method we need to supply a query viewer. This
This is getting the web broker bit to work, is it?
Yeah, so this is getting web broker to work.
This
Yep.
isn't putting web
This isn't
broker-
RP yet.
hello, query, name Glenn, hello Glenn from web broker. And that is the magnitude of our web broker application. So we have a look here, and had you not used this before, you would never have any idea that the reason the SSL doesn't work out of the box is that it didn't have the open SSL lines. So again, RP gives you the help there that you need to just make it work out of the box and don't worry about your code.
Yep, that's the thing. You got to worry about your code. You don't worry about the server code, right?
The relation. When we're running through the wizard, creating a web broker module, it does ask you for the certificate information. So again, this is configuration, whereas RP will try to use the convention for the certificate going into the default location.
Yeah, just we stop on the
So code written with.
So again, the point of RP is that everything works. You don't have to configure it. Only if you want to configure something different do you go to the configuration. So the thing that you expect to happen is when I start the web broker with a certificate, that it should just work. So it does all the configuration, does all that sort of stuff, everything, puts everything working together. And then if you decide that you want some other configuration, you can. But whereas the web broker, for example, you can't get anything to work for 2 days, and then they finally get it all working, and then then it's working. Whereas RP goes around the other way, is it just all works to start with, and then you can refine. So sorry, carry on. So we've got the web broker working now.
And that's why we've got to reduce it. So how do we make this work in RP now? So we just make a new RP web applications, non-returning website, so we see the web application. Make a new folder. web broker. That's pretty much it. We've got our web server working and secured and can get ready to go. We just have to tell it.
That's it.
what to do.
So it's a web server that's now working just by running.
Modules already exist. So we do this with middleware. So the web broker module in RB is a middleware. Because this is a developer trial, it isn't here. So I need to go get it from the prod version. So I'm just going to go add it. There's the web module middleware added. And that is it. And we're going to module is plugged in. And now all I need to do is add the module that we want to use with RB. And it is called Team Module 1. Further down, I've added use the middleware with this new module. So that instantiates an instance of the module and tells RB to use it. So anything I'm missing the reference, and I just need to paste it in. Just copy the end name. Can't put it, but still. Okay, so that's added our module. We have our middleware installed, and we have a using statement to say go use it, and it works immediately, just as I had said. So remember the root path was to the message, and then we had the hello message, and it equals that, and that's how I can come with one. And that's pretty much it. Now you might be wondering about the default RB root path there, so the hello world message. Why aren't we getting that? The reason is that middleware is always encountered in the pipeline before the RB module. So you might think you moved it down to the end here that it would work differently. Now, it turns out that's not the case. Middleware doesn't matter where you put it, will always be hit before the RB modules. You see that's still getting the web broker response because that's in middleware and it comes before the RB module.
So you understand that?
Doesn't mean the RB modules aren't working, it just means that the other one is the.
Okay, I can go through it again.
So we change this hello message in RB to g'day instead. There isn't any such method in the web broker module. So what will happen is it will go through the web broker module, not find anything, and say, okay, it must be an RB response there. So if we now say g'day, group name equals then, that will then work fine from the RB method. So you can see that we've got web broker module and the RB module working together side by side. So now you can extend your application using RB methods from here on, and your web broker module will continue to work for as long as you.
So if web broker gives a response,
Yep.
RB doesn't get a look.
Hope he doesn't get a look in because it comes down the pipe and says, can you handle this request? No. Can you handle this request? No. Can you? Oh, yes, I can. I'm web broker. Oh, that's for me. And so it'll go, yes, I answer that. And of course, if RP, in that case, RP did actually have the same endpoint, but because the web broker module being a middleware gets hit first, RP didn't get a look in because it's already been answered by the middleware. But you saw that I simply added the
New name.
a new name on that endpoint, and then it went through the broker module, a web broker module, because web broker module didn't have any actions with that endpoint. So it said, oh, that's not for me, and let it go through to RP, and then RP answered it. So, so that whole pipeline thing you see gives you that full extensibility. So you can, put things along the pipeline that says, okay, well, this is the thing that's typically done is the thing called the static pages. where you put static pages at the end of the pipeline, and you put like actions and RPCs along the way. So if you were trying to go to a file call / broke, I don't know, hello world or whatever, .html. So API can host that as public pages, but it's the last step in the pipeline. So anything coming in before that matches that route will intercept it and answer before it gets a chance. And by the time it gets down to the thing, it says, "Oh, well, must be a static page." So because it would have gone through the API methods as well. So there's API methods, and the API methods say, "Oh yeah, whatever," depending on where you put the static pages. So static pages again is middleware. So it will hit right now, and that's one of the things I might need to say. Well, put the static pages after. Before I give you the option to go after, but it is a middleware right at the moment. So, so if there's no file that matches it, then it will hit the method at the back end. So that's basically how API works. And so those things I was thinking about, how do I make it asynchronous, and how do I use my functional style to make sure that the responses from API are can be scaled to a higher level. So at the moment with the Indy, I think if you get more than kind of 300 or 400 threads.
Well, Indy uses about 4 or 5 threads just for one.
Yeah, depending on, and then if you fire off your own, maybe because you're trying to reduce the workload, it just spirals out of control real fast. Whereas if you use an asynchronous method, and with the parallel task library, and that's what we're actually going to see tonight is parallel task library.
That's a Delphi library.
Yes, parallel task library is a Delphi library, and then so that gives you threads. In basically, you have a for statement. You say, I want to do this thing 4 times.
Oh, I did 4.
It just go for parallel for these 3 things, and then they'll run them as threads. You don't have to do anything. It's just no code. That's the code I'm actually going to show tonight.
That set of dotted things with all your middleware.
Yep.
Does that get run for each thing, or does that get run once at the start?
So that's the config page.
So it's config.
So this is setting up what happens, and in memory, each of those just becomes like an endpoint. It becomes a memory space.
Yeah, so basically that the code runs once, and then it sets up where all the jumps and redirects go.
Yeah. So essentially, what you get is a big dictionary of endpoints, and so when the method call comes in, it says start searching down the list of things and says, aha, here's the match. So you wanted to go to / blah, ID number, blah, that matches this one. So then it just calls the method that's attached to that. So it really is actually literally a dictionary. So a T dictionary of routes. So what it gets a message from the HTTP request and starts and says, have you got a route that matches this? It isn't, it's not quite. Actually, it's not quite a dictionary. No, that's right. I was originally planning a dictionary, but of course, sometimes the match isn't exact, so you can't actually use a dictionary because you might, for example, say the endpoint is person ID, and that ID would be changing every time, and that's the actual field that you want. So you could have. So I want to say, give me the person details for person 3, which obviously is not going to match exactly in the table. So sorry, so it's not a dictionary. It's a thing that's like a dictionary.
Can we go back to that config post, please?
We can. So I'll share again. And would have been good if I could actually get it working. Another time. I just want to get to the parallel task library stuff today, but anyway. So I'm sharing my screen again. I'm clicking on the big button. I'm pressing that. I'm clicking share screen. I am sharing that one. And we're back again. Okay, wakey. So let's close up. Oh, there's Nick Chapsis. Everybody know Nick Chapsis? I think his name's Chapsis. It might be Chapis or something. He's Greek, but yeah, he's actually quite a good developer. Yeah, it's good. He's good to have a listen to. He is C# though, but rather than Delphi, but he's good. Okay, so let's go back to the code. Was the request? So if we look at okay, sorry, this is the project that we're going to look at tonight. This project here. So we now I have fiddled around with it a little bit. Do we want a fresh one?
Yeah, you had a more complicated one.
Yeah, I can open that one up. Let's open this one. Okay, and I don't know why there's pins. Don't remember that they're pinned to the side. Okay, so every RP project is installed by just going file. You saw on the video, and again, I'm sorry, I don't actually have it in here, but you just say new other, and the first one that comes up here is RP web server, which is no web pages, and then you have RP website, which has which, well, by default it actually has got a bootstrap web page that you can extend, and there's a whole framework which actually turns out to be, again, this is another thing. Have you heard of the Next framework? So the Next framework is a framework for web page development, which overcame some of the things like SPAs are kind of, they're really good, but they also have some limitations. One, for example, if you've got your company website that's running as a single page application, web browsers can't search it. So the web engines can't search it because it's totally dynamic and there's nothing in there. And the other thing is that everything has to be rendered on the client side. So you've got to send a whole lot of stuff down. And if you've got quite a big page, it can take some noticeable time to actually start displaying. So there's some efficiency problems with a single page application. So the general trend these days is to use a kind of hybrid, which is what this Next environment is, where there are static pages that the web engines can search, but there's dynamic stuff that gets injected in when you request it. Now, as it turns out, it's exactly what an RP website is that we came with 2019, and Next hit the 2020. I keep thinking, they've been watching this and working. They said, yeah, that's a good idea. We'll do that. So we actually do have, so RP actually supports this newfangled Microsoft minimal web API already there in RP, and the Next framework is also exactly what RP's web framework is, has the same thing. And it has composition, so you create a little bit of a web page here, a little bit of a web page there, and you say, well, this page has that one and that one and that one in it, and then it composes that at the back end and sends it back to you. Now, I did do a presentation of that in 2020, which I can't even remember. There was quite a few people came to that. But anyway, all right. So, John, your question was, so we've got the program, the main program file there, and we just have configure and run, and the configure is where all the meat is. So this one actually has the rendering engine. So this is actually a web page one. So the rendering engine is the thing I was just talking about, is the Next style server composition thing. So it's what's called server side rendering, where the page is composed of parts from the server side, but there can be dynamic stuff as it's passed in.
These get calls, they're just registering the handler.
That's it. Yeah. So that's why it's called configure, because it's saying this is what it's going to end up being. Yep. And so your actual implementation is your Lambda expression or your anonymous function.
And
so
the use method is registering
middleware.
Middleware.
Yep.
But that gets stored before.
Yes. So the kinds of things we have in middleware are the JSON middleware and the XML middleware, and the static files middleware that serves web pages. So so the API will actually serve the web pages that are in there. So if you have a folder called, usually it's called public, and you put all your pages in there and your icons and your whatever to make your website, you just go, show me that, and it will spit it back out. There is actually a 1 minute API video on that same place, which you can also follow that link to show you how. So you just put the thing in the web page, comes up, and it's like a totally beautiful bootstrap web page with flowing things. And there's a 2-hour video in that training session which shows how I built it, which is also similar to the demo I did in 2020, I think it was, for that. Okay, so you're happy with this
So
now?
would you have a put method that registers a put handler?
That's correct. So you would make this put instead.
Yeah.
So we say dot put. And as I said, you can also say, if you use the dot route keyword instead of put, you can say route, and that gives you the opportunity to say, so you might want some other thing. And then it says, well, sorry, it's so it accepts a, so you say what one you want here, so you can say put or post. Although again, I'm not 100% sure I've done that right. I think I've done it wrong now that it's complaining. Or is it M put and M post? I can't remember. Sorry, but yeah, you can actually say what methods you want. So you can say the method itself, like put, get, post, delete, blah, all of those ones. And also you can say route, where you have a combination of them.
Can the order of those gets be significant?
They are actually significant, yes. So if you have, so this one is coming first, and what you'd find is that this second one actually doesn't work. So this is kind of a big, because this one gets hit first. It says, does this match? Yeah, it does match. So generally what you have to do is get the ones that are smallest and you put them at the end.
Yeah.
So that means the most complicated one, although I might have done some work to fix that, because I thought it was kind of annoying and it shouldn't happen. So at some point that wouldn't have worked, or whether or not I fixed it, I'm not 100% sure. So you see that anything that matches that, no, I'm sure I fixed it.
It depends a bit what to consider the match, doesn't it?
Yeah, so the standard option now is, and also it used to be in Express that was the way it would work too. So you had to have the least, the most complex ones at the top and the least complex ones at the end, so that you can match on, the most specific first. But both, so they've fixed it in Express, and I actually thought it was a problem, and I fixed it before then. So, so I'm pretty sure that it will actually do exact matching by default. And you can use the star thing as well. So that gives you an option as well.
The render colon page is a parameter, is it?
Sorry.
Like a placeholder.
Yes, where it says page there, it's saying anything that comes in with that says render, and assume that the parameter is called page. So you can see in this, in these anonymous functions, they're kind of the most primitive version. So that other thing I was talking about which is the RPC, that will actually make them type safe. So you put a class at the end and it'll match the class and it'll be type safe. But you see, this is not type safe at this point. But a lot of the time you don't mind. It's I always prefer to type safe, but we actually have text being the name of the variable. It's a little bit frowned upon, and but it is quite often done. It's certainly done in Express, and so that's why it's there. And it's not a terrible thing. It's just undesirable. That's all. So ideally you would have RPC endpoints for those, but this works pretty well. And you can always start off with this just to get it up and going, and then extend and say, actually, I really want that to be secured and whatever. So there's other things built in as well. So for example, there's a back end. So there's a mail tool. So it will send emails for you. Depending, so you don't have to implement that either. It's done as an interface, and you can have an implementation of that interface to send emails. The other thing is web tokens. So one of the things that quite often happens in web pages is that you get somebody seeing what kind of data is being sent to your web server, and they scrape that from the web page and then start sending things. So, for example, things that are like a blog post, you can get a bot that will go and analyze the code and say, I can just start sending junk email via this blog post utility that somebody thinks that people are going to type in things, and it's quite. That's how they're expecting you to use it, but quite often they're just people who their total job is to look at every website they can, say, that's exploitable, I can send spam with that. And so what ARPI has is each of those fields can be validated against a token that's issued by the server when you do the request. When you request the page, it'll get a token that's unique and signed by the web server. So if you don't send a token with your request saying, please put this in the blog post, if you don't get the token in the blog post, it will reject it. So that way you can't send spam to it. So it's got all those kinds of features. It's actually fully, if I had any interest in anyone working on it, I'd be doing this all day, every day, and just extending this more and more. So so it eliminates a lot of the tedium that we've had to deal with doing web pages and web development in Delphi. And I'd love people to use it, but as of right now, nobody is. One guy in Germany, that's it. So if you want to start using it, good. Right now, all of the licensing is expired. So if you go to any of those links saying, "Oh, I'd like to play with this," unfortunately today, because the other license, the developer licensing stuff is the certificates have expired on it. It will not work. So I'm going to make an announcement pretty soon saying that I'm going to open source, because the only way anybody's going to get this, and I've done a lot of work, and I think it should be out there, it should be a thing in Delphi. Embarcadero showed some interest to begin with, but we kind of had a spat, and so the negotiations failed there. We should revisit it again. And I'm probably going to make it open source, probably not all of it. So the things that are really marketable, like that JSON and whatever support, I might make those available as moderately cheap middlewares, and that won't stop anybody else from making middlewares as well, because all those interfaces they'll just plug them in. So that's the end of my aspirations to be the next Bill Gates, because I've just given away 6 months work for free. But anyway, what can you do?
Is it likely to be easily adapted to Free Pascal?
I don't see why not. I'm not doing anything anything magical. So Free Pascal should work. To be honest, I've done ever so slightly touched on using Free Pascal, and I've got most things to work and the other project I work in, so I don't see any reason why we couldn't do it. Do this in Free Pascal as well. But one of the things I do want to do is that the other web engine, so the Indie one, as you know, has those threading limitations. So it is thread based. And if you can't mix asynchronous task-driven code with thread-based code, mainly because the parallel task library tries to take control of all the threads so that it can manage it and not make too many, get the right number for when you put it on a machine that's got 6 processors, it'll automatically increase the pool so that it manages all that kind of stuff. So if you have your application, some of it doing the right thing and some of it just making threads willy-nilly, it will not work out so great. So we could probably use any of those event-driven ones as well as a server. So I haven't used them in a while, but the Indie one is mainly where I've worked on. Although I did use the IPC one a while back, but then again that should work fine. There's no reason. But again, so what somebody has to do is make one of these, a T-Web app IPC and a T-Web app HTTPD implementation, and then you can just, instead of doing that, you just make that, instead of that you do it T-Web app. Oh man, if I could just spell IPC.new. And so obviously you then take out this one here, and you'd replace that with your RRP IPC in HTTP IPC.
RRP.
Okay. Oh yeah. What? Sorry, I can't. I don't know what's wrong with my fingers today, but something very funny is going on with the fingers. But anyway, so it would be easy. So that's how you change the back end web server. So you see, at the moment we're quite limited. We say, oh no, I've done it in this one, so you're stuck with it. Whereas after you say, well, just change it, not a problem. And the reason you would want to change to the Windows HTTPD one is because you get the Windows authentication, and it also has HTTP3 built in. So it's starting to do HTTP3 as well. So you can safely write your RP code using the Indie one, and when somebody out there does the HTTPD one, you just swap it out, and then you got Windows authentication and all that sort of stuff. Again, you'd have to put a middleware as well for that authentication process to happen, but yeah, that would be part of the thing to do. So yeah, sorry, we kind of hijacked what I was going to talk about, but that's all right. We've got another session after. So I kind of want to wrap up the things that RP can do, which is pretty much everything. But again, it's not mature. It's still got some development, and right now you can't even use it because the license is all expired. So I would love people to start using it. And that way I don't have to think about two ways of doing work. So at the moment, I do a lot of C# development. I do a lot of Node development. I do a lot of front-end web development. And then I come back to Delphi and go, oh, that's right, I have to do it this way. Damn, I wish it was the same. Oh, no, I'll use RP. Nobody else is using it. So this is the problem we have. But yeah, it's designed to be the modern equivalent that everybody else is doing in our Delphi code. So, and we saw with the web broker, there's no reason you can't use it on top of your code you've already got. In fact, most of your code will probably work there. I mean, I haven't hammered the hell out of that web broker. I imagine it's not perfect. I imagine there's some issues. But you know, if we started to go down that way, so if for example you've had trouble with your web broker, the HTTP is not working automatically, you don't get automatic redirect, you don't get you know, when you start it up, you have to go fiddle with certificates, finding new certificates at work, plug them all in. So RP does that automatically. It will actually generate you a certificate, a developer certificate, and plug it in. And again, when you use the HTTPD implementation, when somebody does that, it would also generate the Windows, the same certificate that that Windows use. So yeah, anyway, so that's about RP. Are we got any other questions about that? I kind of, is it time for the break now? Or
if you had if you're starting a new project and you were comfortable with both C# and Delphi,
yep.
Are there advantages of RP?
Over the C# one?
Yeah.
To be completely honest, the implementation of the asynchronous stuff in Delphi is a real limiter.
Yeah.
No, I know there's a couple of videos I haven't watched yet, and there is the APL with that asynchronous library, which I won't talk about because I haven't really delved into it enough. So it is there, but it is component based. which feels completely wrong to me. So right now I can write C# code that uses fully the that asynchronous process, and we can get 10,000 hits on the machine, and the CPU just there. So even though C# itself is getting faster and faster, but it's 3 or 4 times slower than native Delphi code, even now. So you can write way faster code in Delphi, but what you can't do is write way faster scalable code in Delphi. So my tendency is these days for a new web server that's going to be used and needs to be scalable, I would use C# for that, mainly because we get all of those asynchronous stuff, and the task library is already kind of built in and everything. But for a Delphi code, if you've got existing Delphi code and you want to just plug it in, then absolutely you should use RP for that, because it's what it's for. Yeah. Anything else? Anyone at the other end of the world? Nobody.
So that was your main motivation, Glenn, the sort of creating an equalization with the other approaches?
Yeah. What annoys me most in the world is that it says, "Oh, Delphi is old. You can't use that. It's really old legacy stuff. Why are you still using that?" And I go, "Dude, the latest version of Delphi came out 2 weeks ago." And they say, "Oh, but you can't do this." And I say, "Yes, you can. You can do that." But yeah. So it annoys me that people think that Delphi is old. It's the same age as Java, same age as JavaScript. In fact, if you compare it to C, for example, which was 1970, it's a bit newer than that. But nobody ever says to you, "Oh, why are you still using C? It's old." I don't think anybody ever says that. So I want Delphi to be used by people in the world just as easily as we can do this new wonderful thing in C#. And you go, yeah, well, you can see how they did that in C#. You just do that, you make an interface and do that. But then I have to go make it where it's already there in C#. Somebody else has already done the job. And that is the big failing of Delphi right now, is if I want to do something in C# today, I go to the NuGet package library. I say, search for the thing that does that. 3 choices, 15 million of those downloaded, 3 million of those. Okay, that one looks like the one I want. Plug, press go, working. No cost. That is what kills us in Delphi, is that there's no such thing. Yeah, so we have been trying to do that package thing, and the get it package manager is like a poor man's excuse for that, and it is really terrible. And again, I don't have enough time in my life to.
But isn't part of the problem that there's so many more people writing C# and writing the packages than writing?
But that wasn't the case in 1998.
No, it wasn't back then.
So, but what happened? So why did we lose that impetus? So
geographic versions of Delphi.
well, no, again, it's more that thing. There's a couple of things I see as why Delphi has fallen out of favor. There's its flexibility is a downside. Because what happens is I get a new C# developer comes sits at my desk, and I say, okay, run through a few things. They can say, oh, that's when you do that, right? Okay, do that. Yep, that's when you do that. Oh, yeah, cool. And I say, okay, go off and do that. That's follows this pattern and follows that pattern, follows this one. So I get them and sit them down, because we have where I'm currently working, we have C# code and we have Delphi code. Some of the Delphi code's written in 1990, so it's old. And I get a Delphi developer, a good one, sits down beside me. We sit there for 4 hours saying, look, this is how they did it. They, I see, that's dependency injection, right? Oh, yeah, but they did it. Why did they use that? What? Oh, okay, they did
whatever you like in Delphi.
That's it. You can do whatever you like, and whereas C# says there is established patterns and you should do it. And what's more, the IDE actually says, dude, are you sure you want to do it this way? This is the convention. that people use, and it actually goes, puts green squigglies there saying, I'm not sure this is right. And then you go, oh, I didn't know about it. You read about it and go, oh, okay, now you've done it the same. Then the next guy comes along, another C# developer goes, yeah, he's done that right. But in Delphi, you come along and say, wow, that's awesome. That's really cool the way he's done that. Do you see how this guy's done it? Oh, he's freaking awesome. I don't know how it works, but yeah, it's awesome. And then you spend the next 4 days trying to work out how it works. And so that's such a plus in many ways, but such a downer if you're trying to maintain code. So who's going to pay a developer who has to spend 4 days working out how the code works before they can do any productive work? Whereas if you get, if you do it in C#, the developer comes in, sits down and goes, oh yeah, oh, right, I see what you're doing. Oh, I didn't know about that. Have a quick read. Oh,
Taking the hacker.
yeah. And that's why it has fallen out of favor in the enterprise, is because the maintenance cost of Delphi, because of its flexibility and the lack of following patterns, and even if there are patterns there, what you'll see as an old application, you'll say somebody did it right how it was in 1990, and then somebody did it right how it was right in 1998, and then someone did it right how they did it, and then you get the other hacker who says, I'll just do it my own way, and does it all completely different. So then you try and support this application, which you can't because there's 5 generations of things, which again, the thing's still running after 5 generations.
That's a plus.
Yeah, that's a plus. But if you want to make a single change, you get a developer off the street 3 months before they can make sensible look at the other 2 projects that I've worked on. Again, they're 20 years old, more than 20 years old. So, and you go, wow, it's still running after 20 years. I've got C# code that I wrote in 2015 that's now called legacy, and they don't use it anymore. It's only 5 years old. Doesn't even work on Windows 2016 or whatever, because there's the things like that. So there's so many awesome things that we want that Delphi gives us, and the longevity is one of those things. Because once you have Delphi code in there, you're never going to get rid of it. It's going to stay there for years. Because some of my code still runs on Windows 95. I've got a Windows 95 VM. I drop it in there, it works. But certainly no C# code I ever wrote works on 95. So
C# is costing more, but it's costing in a different way because it's been constantly rewritten.
yes, it is. That's kind of a hidden cost. Yeah.
So the Delphi cost is more obvious, but the C# cost is still there.
Yeah, it is. No, I can't disagree with you there. But in terms of saying, okay, so I do a lot of contracts, as you know. So to get a change done on the C# code, you book the developer for a week. So corporate, someone like, yeah, I can authorize that, it's 5 days, no problem. Come in, they get the work done, and it's done in 5 days because the code's familiar. They understand it because it's written in that style, and the compiler and the linter will complain if you do it wrong. And that forces you to follow the patterns and the established things and the conventions and those kinds of things. So when you come and look at the code, it's familiar. The Delphi code, they have to book 2 months. They say to make a small change. And so corporate just sees the cost. Why does this developer cost that? I mean, it costs 2 days work just to get their developer environment set up. Because you've got components for, like the last 2 projects, they've got Delphi 5, right? Delphi 5. They're still using Delphi 5. And it takes a day and a half to get the components plugged in. And there's 80 applications in that particular suite. So you can't compile a thing unless you've spent 2 days. Now, I have fixed that up and I made a project bundle, so you can actually just check it out and build it. But then after that, the developer spends another week trying to understand how any of this stuff is done. And it's because it doesn't follow any patterns. In fact, it follows the 5 different patterns that it's had over its lifetime. And to get any real work done in that Delphi environment, it takes literally, 2 months before anybody can actually get anything out. Whereas the C# code's done, finished, gone, and the guy's already left. So, and that's what corporate entities see.
So Microsoft's built-in obsolescence was a very good marketing tool, Whereas Delphi's backwards compatibility has meant code has lived, but Delphi struggles.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So it's a terrible thing. So that's what my motivation was for ARPI is because they kept saying, oh, you can't do this. I'm going, yes, you can. Just nobody's done it yet. And so the other thing is that C# is now open source, right? So Visual Studio, you still pay the similar price that you do for Delphi, but you have tons, absolute sea of usable code that's vetted. And in the NuGet package manager thing, there's like it's all vetted, it's checked and virus scanned and security checked and that kind of thing. And if any problem comes up, that NuGet package gets pulled. And what's more, you can go to the GitHub of it and check it out and make your own changes and update it, which I've done in the last couple of weeks. I've updated 3 major projects and pushed those. So they've got some of my code in there in those projects, and it's available to every C# developer today, where Delphi just doesn't have that. It's a real holdup if I want to say, well, how am I going to do this particular thing on Delphi if it's kind of obscure? So the thing I'm doing right at the moment is SSH libraries to connect to VT100 terminals on Unix. All right, so that's what I'm doing. So I'm doing that in a C# code because the library was there, and it wasn't quite what I wanted, but I just updated the GitHub package, and now it is what I wanted. And now I've got a NuGet package with my extensions on it, which anybody can use, and it's working. Where I don't think we could have done that. It would have taken months in Delphi. And there would have been some tools and whatever. And yeah, anyway, I'm ranting now, so I don't want to continue to rant because Delphi is awesome. I love it, but you can see why corporate entities have gone away from it. But you just got a productivity.
They're not prepared to employ developers. They just want to be contractors.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, but that's good for me because I get paid a lot better. it's part of I'm part of the problem. Sorry. Yeah. So Anyway, let's stop ranting there. Functioning and programming, which again, we're tangential to that. So what we actually want to talk about is the parallel task library and how we can actually use it. And I think it's actually quite. It'll be quite good, even though it wasn't quite the topic that people were expecting. It's going to be, since a lot of people hadn't heard of it, right? So are we going to take a break, or we just keep powering on these days?
We keep powering on because we're online, and then we have a break at the end. Okay,
cool. Rightio. So what I've got here is, so I've got a very simple project, and it started out, and I called it single instance, thinking that was a good idea, but it turned out that was a terrible idea because it turned into it. So don't worry about the naming here. So this is on GitHub if you want to have a look at it. So I started off with this application here, which is just a console application. Can we see this? Can we do the control function plus? A bit bigger. And it doesn't really do anything very much. So it says start a stopwatch, so I can time how long it takes. Then I say create a file stream. And again, I'm trying to use these new things. So these things are the equivalent thing to C#. I can write this line of this code, and you see I've actually done it in the C# style. Here we have got inline statements. So you can put the C# code line for line beside this, and it's practically identical. But anyway, we wouldn't necessarily do a for loop here. We'd probably do a for each, but anyway. So I'm starting a stopwatch, and then I'm saying create a temporary file in the temporary folder. So you see that how that's nice and smooth. Now you can just say tpath.get me the thing instead of having to fiddle around looking it up yourself. So, and tfile says create, and that will give you back the stream. You can't get the options there, so you could alternatively do a tstream with the right options. But anyway, yep. And so then I just, is that 100,000 times? 100,000 times I go over and put a random byte and just write 100,000 random bytes into the file. And then I close the stream, and then I stop the stopwatch, and then I say, how long did that take? So this is a really bad example, but it's kind of where it's relevant is that kind of might be is something like you do in a web page request. So you have a web page request coming in, and it's got a bit of CPU stuff, but it's got a bit of IO stuff as well. And so, and ideally, what we would have actually done, what I would have done here in C# is I would have said file system. I would have said write async, which is what I would have done here. So that would write asynchronously means that there's those new Windows extensions for writing files backwards and forwards can actually be asynchronous now. So if there's a bottleneck goes on the process down in the Windows bowels, the thread will swap out automatically. So there's a hold up. You're not getting the bytes that you want. Mainly because maybe your disk is thrashing because there's 500 things using whatever. It'll do that for you. So that's what that async stuff is all about. So you can write asynchronously, and then I can't see how to do it in Delphi. I'm sure you are able. There must be, because these are Windows wrappers.
So maybe it works.
It wasn't read, you say. Okay, write async. So do you think there's a write async method there? So write 64, write buffer, write data, write res, write header. That's the end. There's no write async there.
Oh,
I just assume that's how Delphi always did it. That's how it's always done.
No, it's blocking. Pretty sure it's blocking. It's blocking.
You go to a write statement and it drops the thread and you come back.
Well, that might be awesome if that's the case. And I've been looking for the wrong answer, perhaps. If you're saying that everything is asynchronous by default in Delphi.
No, the write statements. And whenever you go, I mean, geez, I'm going back 20 years now.
Yeah. No, you need to look at the new interfaces on the web, the Win32 Win API. There are separate calls for write and write async in the Windows interface. So when C# calls them, it calls the async version, tells, hey, Windows, do this asynchronous for me. It doesn't say just write. And there are two methods. One says write, one says write async. And in C# it calls the write async one. In Delphi, it calls the write one.
Well, look, it's easy enough to test. Just go and compile the code and then see what it's generated. And then you'll see the API. You'll see the API call.
So these are new APIs that come in with the later Windows.
Yeah, later Windows has it. Yeah.
Mm.
Anyway, so anyway, let's just run this one to see what happens.
And if not, just write it as a direct API call. Problem solved.
Yeah, that's right. So, but somebody has to do it.
No, you do it. Do it now.
Yeah, like as if I've got no time. Yeah,
that's what I do when I have a problem and something doesn't exist in Delphi. You just use an API call. Problem solved.
Yeah, it does solve the problem, but in C# it's already done. I don't have to worry about it. See, then I can move on and have my lunch. But otherwise, I spend 2 hours debugging my API.
Yeah, but an API call's trivial.
Yeah, most of the time. Yeah, no, I agree. In general, we can do it just as easily as that. Is absolutely right. You can, but if I've got to do that 15 times during one day, man, that's annoying. And then I'd want to say, oh, okay.
Then write a wrapper.
Yeah. Then
I'll
give
inside a function. Call it write async and then put it inside a function where you put the API call.
Yeah. And then I'd want to give that to other people. And then I'd put it on GitHub, and then 15 other people would make a different version of it. And then when you get it in your package, you go, oh, that one, oh, they've used that same one. Damn. So now my component won't work together because they've got it in their component set. Now it's got it in my set. Oh shit.
I don't believe in open source. I just put it in my program. Don't worry about anyone else.
Yeah. Except that's you doing all the hard work, see? Whereas, no, it's absolutely right. I agree wholeheartedly. But there's practicality, and you just die of old age doing stuff yourself. That's why you've got junior developers. That's what I say. Okay, right. So that's our call. So what would we want to do about this? So we want to turn this into threaded code, right? So we want to do that maybe 10 times. So here's one I prepared earlier. Oh man, I keep starting Store Stream when it's already started. Sorry. So I refactored that a bit, and then I said, okay, run 10 times with no threading. So I'm going to change to that one. So we started off with that just single loop. And so I changed that now to, okay, yes, I'm going to reload that also. I made a slightly different variation where I've said, okay, 10 times, and then I wrapped that one in a function call. And so I use my functional rules, And I do have a presentation on functional rules, which I came up with a while back. It's not great, but it certainly gives you the idea. So what we want to make sure is when we call our procedure, it is what they call mathematically. John's going to tell me. Pure mathematical thing. So it will give you the same answer every time. Right now, as it turns out, we're putting random numbers in here, so we won't. But so we can't always follow the convention. But we're certainly not doing anything else except the thing we said. We're writing 1,000 random bytes. That's what we're doing. So we're not trying to trick anybody by saying, "Oh, we're writing 1,000 bytes." Oh, and we're updating the server, and we're writing over there. We're just doing exactly what it said.
Well, I would argue you are updating the server by writing a file to it.
Yes, but we said we were going to do that. Yeah, we're not lying. So that was one of the things we quite often lie in our code. We have a function that says I'm going to do A, but it ends up doing A and perhaps B, and then after a while you might change it to C as well, but you haven't updated the name. So you shouldn't tell stories. Then we're getting red squigglies here, even though this code compiles. So we just wrap that, and again, there's nothing too magical about this. All we're showing is that if you run that single threaded one 10 times, it's going to take 10 times longer. So it took about 800 or 600 milliseconds, and so that took about 500, probably because the CPU is warmed up, or I don't know. If we ran it on average, it would have been about 10 times faster than 10 times slower than the single threaded one. All right, so we didn't do any threading. We just ran it 10 times. Okay. And so that gives us a good thing. Now, if we're going to change this to threaded code, we might encounter a few things we don't expect. So in this case, we're not returning anything. We've got a procedure. But what if we had a function? Oh man, I keep starting source tree when it's already started. Sorry. Okay, so this one here, we've converted it to a function that is it okay me doing this instead of actually typing it?
Yes.
Is it fine? Yeah, because some people say that's annoying. But anyway, we'll just go with this. All right. So, okay. So what we've done here is instead we said, okay, we're going to write 100,000 random bytes, incrementing the counter. So you see, I changed the name there to not lie about what I could have just left it write 100,000 bytes, but that's not what it's doing anymore. It's writing 100,000 bytes and it's incrementing my counter. So it's returning this C. So we're putting in C and it's coming back and it says, so it's saying now in the message that that's the number that is completed. So, okay, so if we, again, no threading in this one. And so we're going call 1 to complete the balls. Yeah, so it's just serially going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. Right? So you can see if we start threading this, that's going to be hard because we're not going to know when something finishes. We're not going to be able to return the position of this thing because that just you might send off 1, 2, 3, and 4, but for some reason or other, the 5th one comes out at position 2. So it's going to. So this counter thing is definitely not going to work. But anyway, so let's give it a go. So if we now look at my repository here again, so you can see I've gone 3 different ways here. So in the first way, I just added a thread object and then did it how we would have done it 10 years ago with a thread object. But I also here I used the parallel for, which in this case is pretty close to the thing we want. And in this other one, I used tasks. So and you could also, because it's quite popular, you might have used that omni-thread implementation, which you can use similar things. And I think the parallel task library, some of that stuff in omni-thread is actually slightly better than the Windows one. I haven't actually, to be honest, used it, but sorry, than the Delphi one. And so, but the idea is the same. So I could have done that, but I haven't done it. So we've got a thread object, and we've got the parallel for, which is just a wrap up for tasks, really, but it's got management and stuff like that, which helps with the workflow, and also tasks. And I've got a couple of solutions on the tasks that that will help understand that. So let's have a look at the first one, the thread object. So I'm going to the thread object version now, and hopefully I can remember what I did because it was late last night. So I had a demo at 3 in the afternoon yesterday. I was desperately working on that, so I didn't start this till sort of 7 o'clock last night. So I hope that it still makes sense to me this morning. Okay, so what I basically did was I added this random byte writer thread here, which is not very exciting, but the thing is I've got that counter in there so I can keep track of it. So the solution I came up with was all I really want to do is call that static method I already had. And so I don't know how other people feel about this, but I'm kind of tending to do this now, is I actually write static methods and then wrap them with objects. And the reason I do that is because I can decide later that if I want to call this asynchronously or call it either directly without creating the object first, because if you keep these functions to be pure and they just do the one thing, there's no state to manage. So there's no reason to have it inside of a class. It's sometimes advantageous. And in fact, generally, if you're just going to have
thing as a class object, a class method in an object.
It's be like class.
So it's really just a naming convention. It's just a matter of keeping them together.
Well, no, it's slightly different though, because the object that you have is probably got some state in it that you would have on the class.
But if you just can't use the state, there's no difference between a class method and a function.
Yeah.
Because all they can have is the stuff you pass in.
Yeah, that's one technique using class method. I often just use a record now for that though. I don't even bother making a class. I just make a record with class, whatever way.
It doesn't matter. It's just the naming convention, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we can actually do it either way.
Functions in a module, or you put functions in a class.
Well, static methods have access to stuff of the class, you know,
they can have class variable. They can have access to a class variable if you have them, but they can't have any access to instance variables.
Yeah.
And a class variable can only be a compiler. It has to be a set of compile time. I don't know. I don't use class.
There's some nuances, and then all of them are quite good. The only thing is that I always say is we're trying to manage state. If you're using this asynchronous approach or the parallel task library, it's difficult to manage state then. So life cycles. It's difficult to manage life cycles. If you have a thing where you pick up an object and say, here, give it to that thing and expect to never come back again. How is it tidied up? So you have to put things into it to make it tidy up. Whereas if you have a static method that you know works the same and that's in a record, if it's in a record, you just give it the record and say, oh, there you go.
No, you expect them to sort the record.
Yeah, so we don't have to free the record or
But
anything.
you can't put the record on a list because then you have to manage the
well, in using modern approach, you can actually do that. So you can actually put a record into with generics. Yeah, if you use generics, you can put a record into a list, which I know it's slower, but it's still way faster than C#. So I don't have a problem doing it in Delphi. So the only thing is that C# is getting faster and faster. So we're not going to have that one soon.
Probably better in Delphi, isn't it?
Probably is. Yes. Anyway, so now we're doing this. So our execute method has just calls that static method. So theoretically, very, very thin wrapper on that.
So it's not actually going to increment the counter.
It will here because it's going to this one. Yes, I had to fiddle around with it a little bit. So there was some experimenting and mainly because
Well, originally it was just returning incremented value.
Yes, so I did. I think I did change it. So maybe you're right. So I stopped worrying about. So it is returning the incremented counter, but it's ignoring it in this particular implementation. So that was a bad thing. Again, late at night last night after I was already tired. So we'll just have to go with it on this one. Okay, so that's what our thread object does. Now, so if we run this one, first thing we notice is it is that's perfectly fine because this particular version of the thing is not using the thread object. Sorry, I forgot that this one didn't actually use it yet. So it was still calling the old method. I created the thread object, but I hadn't actually plugged it in yet. So that was creating the thread object. Sorry about that. Man, you can't take me anywhere, to be honest. Okay, so then I actually added in and called the thread object instead. And so this is the thing you've got to think about when you're handling multiple threads. So this is the old thing. How do you get these things to talk to each other? And it's even something I wasn't aware of. You know, the system console. And I haven't used. I've been using it for years and years, but I didn't realize it's not thread safe. Found that out last night. So you can, if you write onto it, it just overwrites it. It's totally bad. Let's look and see how bad. So so you see, the first thing it came back and said, "Oh, I've done it already. I finished," and that's because all the threads are still running. And so we got, oh, call one complete. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Is it 11? Is it really 11? The answer is yes. It gives you, it outputs on the screen more than the number of threads. So let's look how we did that in the code here. So what we said was for I equals 1 to 10. So I made a T list of that thing. So again, we're trying to manage, we've got to manage this thing, and I'm leaking them all at the end here because I deliberately turned them off.
Byte writer for every one.
Hmm?
You're creating a byte writer for every.
I did, because I wanted 10 of them. Yeah, I didn't need to, of course, and I could have just created. No, well, actually, isn't that what I did? No, I did. I created 10 thread objects and added it in 10 times and let it run.
So they've all got different counts.
Yeah, so that you would think that, but they all seem to have one. Anyway, so bizarre behavior, you get unexpected behavior because you're running threads at the same time and they're trying to communicate with, with the screen, which is the thing it's all trying to synchronize with. So you still need to do that synchrony, synchronicity is absolutely critical.
I
anyway,
understand why they're all one, but I don't understand why you've got 11 of them.
Yeah, that's because there's not really 11 of them. It's just that the output display is getting overwritten. Something happens to it and it corrupts the display output. So it's not really 11.
Yeah.
So there's only 10, it's only called 10 times,
yeah,
but there's 11 display on the screen. And then I thought, wow, that's bizarre, because I knew there was only 10. And in fact, one time I ran it a couple of times and there's like 17. And I'm going, what? What's going on? And then another time there's missing half the characters. And then the next time there was an extra row with no carriage returns. I'm going, okay, I see what's happening here. It's not really doing it 17 times. It's the display is not synchronized.
It's not always 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so if I jump right to the end here, I did actually get a working solution with all the threads in it. And it's way more complex than we originally started with. So I did this, but then I had to actually add, so here's our writer, but I also had to add like a whole locking mechanism. So I had to put blocking in and so I had to put a spin lock on here to do the output to ensure that the output was thread safe. So everybody knows what a spin lock is?
No, I hadn't come across the spin lock.
Okay, so the spin lock is a very, very lightweight locking mechanism, doesn't use any system things. Basically what it does is burns up CPU ticks. So it'll just go spinning around. So for anything that's really short, like you're just adding two numbers or whatever, maybe outputting the screen's even a bit too much, I'm not quite sure. It'll just burn up a few CPU cycles waiting for the lock to come to get free, because you know it's going to be like nanosecond kind of level. And a spin lock is good for that when you just want to update like a small thing. This is probably okay for a spin lock. There is documentation about spin lock. but it's just a locking mechanism. You could have used a synchronizer or, you know, a critical section or something like anything like that would be fine. But the spin lock is appropriate in this case, I think. And so having dealt with all that, I now found that my 10, I still couldn't get the timer to work. And what's worse is I think they all end up being output at the same time. I'm not sure. I think maybe they genuinely do run all at the same time. It's a little bit hard to say.
No, there's no limit there.
Yeah, it starts at 2, yeah, because I did I just can't, I'm bad at maths, right? And so if we have a look at the peaks for the 2 CPUs on this VM, so that was when we ran the one earlier, and this is when we ran that one. So you can see that first implementation, there was some kind of internal blocking thing, so it's much better than the one that eventually had with the spin lock in it. So you get strange kind of unexpected behavior is that without any locking, it took longer, but these two actually were quicker. But you know, so it's a strange animal. So that's using thread objects. So I would not recommend anymore doing it that way because it's way easier to use that parallel task library for this particular thing. So let's have a look at this parallel 4 and this I believe is the correct use case of parallel 4 here. So we're just going to go back a step. So we were at the point where we converted the function and we wanted to pass it in. We still have all the same threading issues, so we have to do the management of the output. But when we look at the code, we'll go back and look at it here. I'm going back to this one. So if it would have been good to compare the other code. Maybe we can look at it in the. Maybe I haven't plugged it in. So all we say is, so the original code said 4i equals 1, 2, blah. Do the thing, call it. And so all we did was said, okay, just go parallel 4, 1 to 10, and then put our lambda expression. Made that a lambda expression instead of an actual code block. And that gives us our 10 threads. And that's it. That's all we had to do. And so we got 6 and 5 are out of order, but 7, 8, and 9, 10, 1, 2, 2, they worked pretty good. And the stopwatch worked.
And it's quick.
Yeah, because it manages.
Yeah, probably.
And the 10 is saying use 10 threads because with the parallel you can't tell it how many threads you use, can't you?
No, that was actually just how many times. This is how many threads. That's right. Yeah. So I'm going to do this thing on 10 different threads. So this is the max thread and that's the minimum thread.
I think I'm using 2 threads in the pool.
Yeah, so in the pool, it will only use 2 actual threads.
I thought with the parallel thing, you could actually specify how many threads.
It's got how many tasks.
How
many tasks do I want to do? But there's only 2 CPUs. There's only 2 logical CPUs. So if you make 10 threads, then it's going to do that swapping thing. Whereas if you say,
no, that's not.
Whereas the parallel task library says, well, no, I'm going to make sure that on this machine, it's only got 2. I'm going to make sure
that's automatic.
Yeah, that kind of it.
But then it can use up all of your CPUs. Like if you've got 8 CPUs.
Yes, so that's the logical thing. You think,
I thought you could limit it so it didn't use up all the CPUs.
Trust me that people have asked that question before and they've solved it. So you don't have to worry.
I mean, I'm going back to the demos on the parallel threads at the introduction.
Yeah, it can. So it's mostly, you mostly don't have to worry about it. All you have to do is be sure that you're asking for the task to be created and there's nothing else creating rogue processes. And don't ever use sleep in any of your methods. Because as soon as you put a sleep in there, that stuffs the whole thing up. Because it'll go.
Because that'll stop that thread.
It'll say, stop that thread. And it's go, but dude, that's the thread I'm using to get my tasks through. And now you've stopped it. So then it has to go, you say, well, I'll negotiate with the CPU to get another thread because you blocked that one. So then it has to go create a new thread, which is expensive. So that actually is the other thing that I've forgotten until just now when you mentioned that, is to create a thread, execute it and tidy it up again. It's that's work. Whereas the libraries generally create the right number of threads for their pool, execute all the tasks on that one thread, or on that 3 threads, or whatever, however many decides is the right number to use, and then wraps up that thread at the end. So it's more efficient also in that way. So
Is that fixed for the compile time, or is that a runtime thing?
No, it's a runtime thing, yes. Yes, so the parallel task library looks at the CPU it's running on, or looks at the system it's running on, and decides the right number of threads that is optimized for that machine. Now, it may get it wrong depending on the architecture of the machine and how good the algorithm is in the task library manager pool threader. But it's kind of, we've got to the point where we basically don't have to worry about it. It'll just, as developers, we just say, create a task, put it on the queue. That's it. And then we just got on with our code. We don't worry about, trying to make the machine too clever. So this is the thing is, we go to a lot of effort trying to, I'll make sure it doesn't do this. I'll use a pointer here to make sure that this string gets copied in an efficient manner or whatever. And then you spend 2 hours doing that, and you look at the binary code, and if you've just done for each equal 1, 2, it produces the same binary code. So these, the compiler people are smarter than us. And also the system engineers, again, smarter than us. So we don't get a lot of mileage. You can, if you really, really need it, you can do some things and whatever. But if you follow, you say, look, I'm not going to worry about it. The library is good for that. That's what its job is. And you'll get to the point where, it's not performing well. Somebody will come up with the new library and, that problem is fixed.
The library, yes.
Yeah. So we don't have to worry about it. It'll just get better and better, and we don't need to worry. It's like the JSON libraries. I mean, when we first started, some of them were really slow. And then that company said, I'm going to make mine better than theirs. And then the other company said, I'm going to make mine better than theirs. And this happened in C#. So it was going backwards of JetBrains, backwards and forwards Microsoft, JetBrains, Microsoft, and it was going backwards and forwards. At the end of Microsoft said, we'll just buy it. And so now the Microsoft one is actually the JetBrains one. I think it's JetBrains. It is the JetBrains ones inside. And that's now open source. So yeah, again, we don't have to worry about those kind of things anymore. I'm old school. I used to do 6502 assembly language on Commodore 64. And man, you had to manage it then. And you got 32K of RAM to deal with, and on the VIC-20 you had to add 5K. So I'm glad I don't have to do it anymore.
So that incrementing C is not.
Yeah, that's correct. That's not working. So then I looked at it and I said, okay, why is that not working? And the simple answer was, I think in this particular pathway, if I go back to the thing, I only had to do, so I said from 0 to 9 instead. So we'll just look at that one. So I didn't make a lot of changes. So I said in here, was it? I said it somewhere. Trust me. Just trust me on this one. Okay. Okay. I did something. Yeah, I did something different. And that worked a little bit better, I think. Or I said no. Yes, it's
doing an increment like that in a parallel 4.
Yep.
You're going to hit errors.
Yeah.
Basically.
So can you see this thing here? I had the C up here before, and then I'm putting the C in here, but now I've actually done it. It's a little bit deceptive, but I've actually done it in line now. So if we try to do it around the other way here, let me just show you this one that you're going to encounter exactly in this for this one. That all looks like it should work. So I've got a C up here, and I'm going, here's my C, and I'm going, I'm outputting the C and I'm putting the I in here. So you'd expect this is the iterator, and because that's how I did it. -1, right? So 0 to 9 instead of whatever. And then I'm incrementing so it would come back with C being the value 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever. So you'd think that this should work. Now, but the problem is that this C, even though this is an anonymous function, can't be captured. So this anonymous function here doesn't really understand that this C is the one you meant. So if we try to run that, and this is the thing that you'll get. Of course you had to run, didn't you? Man, okay, all right. So we'll find it in the other one. It had to do that for me. Okay, well, this is 10.3. I was running it in 10.4 yesterday. I was getting a strange bug. Oh, actually, no, I didn't actually look at the outcome there. Sorry, let's look at what it did. And that was pretty awesome. So so it actually did exactly what we wanted, the same as that other one, but it ran it asynchronously and took 3 seconds, whereas the other one took 5 seconds. So, and if we look at the, so you can see that these are fairly narrow as compared to that one when we ran it on 10, it was fairly fat. So we are actually getting some efficiency there and a bit more speed. So that one actually worked pretty well.
6 and 5 are backwards again.
6 and 5 are backwards again. Okay, yep. All right, I ran on different hardware yesterday. I was getting them all over the place yesterday. So this is actually,
But that's okay, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because you're running them in parallel.
that's right. Yeah, we have no idea when it's going to finish.
Expect them
Yeah,
to come together.
Well, we're running 2 at a time in parallel.
Yeah.
that's right. Yep, and we're using the fact that we don't have to create and destroy threads and whatever to give us a bit more advantage. So it's easier, and it's just changing that 1 to 10.
I just don't think either of these versions are actually safe on the increment.
No, that's actually the point of the next bit where I need to go. So they are, yeah. So they actually aren't thread safe to be. So it looks like they are, but that's because I'm tricking it inside in here and making that
You're
answer.
only running at 10 times, so you're probably going to get away with it.
So we are getting away with it, but John's absolutely right. This isn't still good. So there's one more thing that you need to know about that, but I'm not sure it's on this branch of the repo. We're at the end of this one. We are on the end of that one. Yep. So now I'm confused about where do I need to go next. I want to go back to the task one.
If you have a captured variable,
Yeah.
that shouldn't have made any difference because you're only capturing one version of it.
Yes. Now, so I fully expected for it to work last night. However, I was getting an error, internal system error 325550 or something when I had the variable outside. And I'm going, what the hell does that mean? And I thought it's got to be something to do with the capturing of that variable. So I put a variable inside and then it worked. So and I was surprised that worked.
But
when I
the
do it.
variable incremental.
No, that it compiled because yesterday it was not compiling when I was using that external C in here, and I had to make it a locally declared one. So that was a scoped variable within that scope there. That worked on 10.4, but this didn't.
But then it won't pass between procedures because it's within the procedure.
But yes, that's correct. So it wouldn't. That's totally fake, but it's a different one. That's a different variable. So when it's like this, that is thread safe because it just like an ID. It's not.
But have
really
you got
anything.
C in the other end of the function?
So this C and this C are the same. This is a different C.
Where are you implementing C? I can't quite see.
It's inside here.
So you're passing C into them.
No,
I'm passing I.
You pass C in and it returns 1 plus that value.
Yeah. So again, I probably haven't got this quite right, but the idea of using this approach, instead of creating a thread object where we can just say this, and it works better anyway, and the workflow looks easier, and it's like a one-line change. So why would we not use this approach? There's obviously, and also the fact that that it does what we call a wait for all. If you do this just using tasks, where I'm pretty sure that in this implementation, T parallel 4 is just a wrapper for the tasks exactly the way I'm going to do it in the next one. And it uses this thing called wait for. So it has a list of threads that it knows are running, a list of tasks that it knows it has to run. It creates those, tracks them, and then waits for all of them to finish and then returns. So this is the same as a task wait for all, which we'll see in a second. When I choose the other. Anyway, so parallel 4, I think this is the right use case for that. Again, I started this on 7 o'clock last night, so I must admit I'm not 100% sure I've done everything correctly there. But the idea is correct. So if we now change to the task one here, And we're doing the same thing again, only using the tasks. And the thing John pointed out before was this thread safety on variables is actually hard. But fortunately, there's tools that help you do it. So running it this way, so this is how I did it first out of the box. And again, I had that same problem. I wonder if it's a Delphi 10.4 thing where they perhaps fixed it, because I had an inclination that you shouldn't be able to do that. You shouldn't be able to capture that C inside of there, because yeah, I was kind of into. I thought it would probably work, but anyway, let's see if it actually. Let's see what this gives us. And I think this is the one where I saw all of the screen goes. This is a different machine than the one I was using. And you can see that everyone returns true to the number 2. And that's because even though I'm passing in I and incrementing, sorry, that's because I put in 1 in there. How about put 1 in there, see what we get. Again, I've forgotten what I do now, so that's interesting, isn't it? Because at the time the thread starts, what's the value of I? So these all these threads start, and I has finished. Yeah, well, we incremented it by 1, so it would have finished with 1 to 11. Oh, 11. Okay, I've gone past it, and then it says, "What's the value of I?" Oh, it's 11. Okay, so then I returned 1 more than that. Well, so you can see you've got to really think about when you're doing these loops here. Okay, well, what's going to be captured? What is the value of this going to be when it executes? What's going on here? So that's why we're doing the C on the outside here. So let me just see if this C on the outside works here, and I wonder if it is a difference in 10.4. So I'm going to take this, see if we can use that outside C, or if it gives us that compile error.
Oh, you want the C over the right hand side.
Oh, sorry.
You don't want an I.
C.
At the end of that call, write 100,000 times.
Yep.
You got to.
Oh, well, okay. We could put pass in C there, yeah. But that one's because it's running. Yeah, it looks like that's not an issue in 10.3, but in 10.5 you get this bizarre error if you put the variable on the outside. I don't know if it's a bug or if it's yeah, okay, seems to be a bug. Again, the stopwatch isn't working, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, and then that's it.
Yeah, I figure that's because it's not thread safe.
That's totally not thread safe, because this screen is not thread safe. That variable's not thread safe. So so what we need to do here is use one of the tools that comes with the tasks library. Oh, actually, I'll close that RP one up so I don't keep changing to it. Okay, so this one, and hopefully this will make some kind of sense here. I use task instead. I'm on the last one of this. It's a little bit confusing, even for me. I might have forgotten to save a step along the way, so this might jump straight to the end, which will be not quite what I had planned, but hopefully it isn't too hard to follow. But in this case, what I had to do is create I missed the step in between where I was doing the interim. But what I'm doing here is creating a list of tasks, and I'm using this thread tracker, which is fairly thin wrapper. And unfortunately, I would have been better if I'd saved the step in between before jumping to this one at the end. But the outcome is that when we run this version, I think it all works correctly now. Yeah, so it's okay that 10 and 9 finished out of order, but it says I'm in position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 10. So it knows about what finish I'm at. You know, I finished this one, I finished that one, I finished this one, I finished that one. It knows what order that is, and it also knows the number that was passed in. So unfortunately, I jumped right to the end here, which this thread tracker thing that I had to write uses the approach that I needed to. You know, where did I actually put that thread tracker? Thread tracker. Okay, so it looks like a lot of code here, but the important thing is in here has the thing that I have lost. The thing I was trying to describe is definitely not there. I'm so sorry. And I don't know if I can remember what it is. There it is. No, it's here. Right. Okay, gotcha. This is the thing that's important. So it uses this T interlocked object, which allows us to increment an external variable in a thread safe way. So T interlocked has quite a few different things. It's kind of limiting. T interlocked, it has things like add, decrement, add, bitwise compare and set, exchange. So it's got a few of these tools. So it's a tool to help you manage shared variables. It's not a great tool, but it's the one that comes with it. So importantly, what this interlocked thing here says is safely increment C given all these tasks. And so we still have to do blocking, but again, it's something we don't generally have to worry about as developers too much. We just have to know that, we have to use one of these interlock ones because there's a dependency between this task and the other tasks that start there. So I'm sorry I did have to jump to the end where it was quite a good experience for me when I was working through to get to that answer. I did actually follow the documentation through, and there's a couple of tutorials which you could have a look at. Let me see if I can find them for you. So Embocadero task examples. I'm pretty sure it'll come up. Task for the parallel. Okay, so this is this one. That's it. So it does have this example here where, again, I told Marco this back in 2018, I think, at the symposium, and said, you're using tasks, dude, don't put sleep in your thing, and I'll just break it. So their example is actually a bad example. You should never use sleep if you're going to do parallel task library because it stuffs everything up. But anyway, it just does some work, all right? So it would have been better to do something like I did, was actually do some kind of real task. Mine's not a really good example of memory of CPU though, because mine has a lot of IO stuff in it. So that example of writing a file is mainly IO bound, not CPU bound. So if you wanted to do some intensive thing like calculate a root of a big number or something, which would give you a better idea of the task comparison. But yeah, so those examples are there. I might put this one. There is a couple of others.
Glenn?
Yeah. Yes, hello.
Sorry, I was coming in from the car. If it's not going to interrupt you too much, could we go back one version?
Okay, on the task one?
Yeah, before this interlocked one, please. If you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I have no problem at all. Whatever you want to talk about is no problem. And again, I haven't worked with this very much. I have the idea of it from C#, how it works there. And so I'm expecting the Delphi one to work the same. But to be honest, when I started looking at it last night, it didn't seem to be the same. So, hang on, I don't think I changed. So, okay, we're already on that one. Sorry, I want to go this one. And we'll discard any changes in case. Sorry, I had local changes. That's why it looked like it was different. Okay, so here we are here.
I just couldn't see so it's a regular. Would you mind trying something?
Sure, I'll try anything.
Quickly. So we're doing the loop in I.
Yep.
Can we declare let's go. So you had C as a local variable, didn't you?
Yeah, C is a scope variable. Yep.
Right. Okay.
So C is a scope variable, but you see, I was actually putting 1 in here. You saw what happened when we just put I in there. It just gave you a 12.
Can we try putting var C becomes equal to I before you Sorry, maybe a different variable. Maybe var A becomes equal to I.
Yeah, so in here,
Yeah.
but B equals I, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, to try and capture it anyway, and then
Okay, yeah, I
following
can
it with
see
B.
your logic. Yeah. So it could be because B will be captured, have a captured value, but the I won't be. So you could be right here. So this may work. Yep.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. We're missing a colon.
Oh man, so I've been doing Node and
Yeah.
C#
Yeah.
and stuff this week. So man, I even did a bit of pick basic as well, and that has colon equals means concatenate. So I have been typing it wrong all week. I'm sorry. Okay, let's skip this. So I think you're right. I think we'll get the right numbers now. Oh damn.
No. Okay.
No, so it didn't capture it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So again, I'm just experimenting. I can see why it might. Mhm. So you would think because this is an anonymous function, we would fully expect B to be captured at the value of I at the time the anonymous function was generated.
Well, I'm pretty sure.
Or not.
Create them all and then start them all afterwards. Create
It's
them.
capturing I still.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're actually doing task run straight away. So we're not starting. So as soon as this code, as soon as this run is called, it starts executing on a new thread or on a new task. Well, we don't actually exactly know when it's going to execute, but
How long it's actually taking to create the task, because it's.
tasks are in-memory objects, right? So they're not system level things like a thread is.
They're really quick.
They're really fast.
So they're all starting.
No, actually,
All the next ones.
they're getting in the queue, sorry, but it's still got to start a thread. Not the first one's got to start a
When they
thread.
get in the queue, they've got the value that it started with.
Yeah, but it's already gone past. Yeah. So, but obviously it's not capturing. So
You've got to move
this whole behavior is very typical.
Feature.
If you
Yep.
move the var B colon equals I
Yep.
up about 3 lines,
Okay.
just before var.
Oh, you know how we can do that thing where it moves the lines? Still don't know how to do that. So
Yeah, put no down,
Just put it
just
there.
put it there.
above the procedure?
Well, it doesn't really matter, that'll do. Just put it in there.
What? Okay, so I would have thought that's exactly the same thing.
No, that's not.
But B equals, but that wouldn't be, you'd have to make
I
that.
don't think that's legal.
That's not going to work.
I think it's got to go above bar task.
Can we
hasn't it?
try that?
That's just going to be an error because we're inside the run.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on. Oh, sorry, no, move it up 1 line.
One more. So we want to do B up here. So we think the B might be captured.
Yeah, now you're capturing the B.
Yeah. So give anything a go. So this is fun to experiment because it is exactly the issues I was having last night. I'm going, how do I have to capture this damn thing? I could use an interlock value here, of course, and that would work too.
No, just
Try running it.
Okay, we want to find out what happens. 11. Okay, we can't win. We can't win, Dar.
This reminds me, because Malcolm Groves wrote a blog article about pretty much exactly this with regard to Android or something years ago.
Yeah.
And my immediate intuition was like injured. And I was like, what? So yeah. But thank you for trying it.
Yeah, but that's okay. So this, because we're inside the anonymous function though, I don't think it's actually the thing. So if we had, no, it still would behave exactly the same, even if it wasn't anonymous. Although
I think looking at it,
same, yeah.
my bet is that the compiler is actually broken
Uh-huh.
because it's gone I equals 1 to 10.
Yep.
Increments that, commits that, and then it treats the other section as if it's only been called 10 times.
No, it's
No, it's
actually storing the reference to I, and it's basically carrying the reference over and saying, okay, what is
But it's not doing it 10 times, it's doing it once.
Glenn? Oh,
Do a
sorry.
And it seems to be in every instance, that's what's actually happened. So
Can
you've got
I?
an 11 and a 12, which means that effectively the compiler is
Well,
It's
actually
not
think
doing
you're
what you
correct.
think it's doing. It's not going full var and incrementing over 11 times and then doing the task. It's just going, oh, for I 1 to 10, yeah, good. Yeah, we do that. We get an 11. Yeah, that's beautiful. And then we increment over this.
What if
11
we do
times
this?
with the variable held?
What if we do this?
It's broken. It's not doing what you think it's doing. What it
No,
should
no.
be doing.
I think it's actually doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's got a reference to I.
Okay, try it.
I reckon it's got a reference to I, exactly what we expected. And now it's saying differs from the previous declaration. Okay, function, Okay, oh man, what did I do? So how about we go up here and put it here as well? Okay. So we're not getting a win there.
I think my theory is correct. It's broken.
I don't think so.
No, I think
I'm
it is.
sorry. I'm very sorry for like throwing your talk off track, but
This is
we
the
can-
awesomest talk I've had. Throw it at me.
So when we have anonymous procedures, we can like bake in constants from the outside scope.
Yep.
So it may not be worth trying right now, but I'm thinking instead of a procedure there, we declared it as a function that takes an integer, i.e. hang on, sorry. Am I getting confused?
Just look at the generated code. You'll soon have your answer worked out.
Anyway,
Okay.
I think you should. I withdraw my suggestion and allow you to proceed.
No, look, I've spent the last few weeks breaking code apart, and it's amazing how many fucking bugs you find when you look down inside things.
Yeah, well, that's entirely possible there's a bug, but I feel that it's the correct behavior.
No, you're thinking begin end and it's normal Pascal and it should be behaving itself. It ain't. It's not like that at all. It's like,
Okay.
oh, it's the bar goes around the outside. We get the value there, and then we run it 10 times. They just put the compiler together wrong. And every instance you've given me has demonstrated what I've just thought. Like if it's 11 or 12, it's not incrementing through for var equals 1 and going to begin end and then doing it and then doing them as 10 times on 10 different threads. No, it's just running 10 different threads with one reference once it's set once. That's it.
Yeah, that's right. So you're saying if we actually displayed the address of it instead,
I think you'll get the same bizarre result. Yeah. To do it, give it a shot.
so we actually want, so we're passing in, so let me see here what we get. So we've got B. If we do the reference, so we're not going to be able to do it there. We put it on the inside. So if we say B equals I here,
and give it a little bit of a hope. Just humour me.
yeah,
Use the I both capitalised or both lowercase, just in case something else is weird going on.
Okay, rightio.
Look, when you looked at as much shit as me and found as many bugs as I have in the years over compilers, it's just the way life is. Everyone, like when you're a programmer, most programmers never spend their lives looking at assembly code. But I've started my programming life writing assembly code and then spent more time on compilers. So I've come to the conclusion that many bugs get written into compilers. The code isn't always the same when you move from one platform to the other, and you just sort of hope that it works.
Can I? Sorry, I'm here again interrupting. One thing, not necessarily to try, but that would work.
Yep, go on.
Would be if we had a separate function that takes an integer and returns this function, right, to print out this statement based on that integer.
Put it outside the loop, it might work.
Yeah, yep.
And
Yeah,
then, so that would bake in the integer into the anonymous function. And when we used it.
Take the right line and drop it below the end.
Yeah, which if you remember, that's what we did. So the solution that I showed you just before actually did, I think, took account of all those things. So it is using
Right.
the captured, it uses the incrementer, the interlocked incrementer to make sure that we've got the correct variable. And it also executes the display as a separate function. So I think that's both the two things you just said, I think. So if you want to, so I'll put the GitHub up here. Hang on. So if you want to have a play and yeah, I'm happy if we go bash it. And I wanted to know the answer because I'm not familiar with the Delphi one. It certainly seems to be different, at least, than the.
Because it might not be the compiler as such. It might be the optimization function that's causing the problem.
Yeah, that could be so. And if you wanted to explain the assembly code, and I used to do 6502 assembly, but that was when I was 12. So it's a number of years ago now. I can't really, I can't honestly say that I would remember it well.
You're not as no, you were 20.
I'm sure. Eventually,
you're not that old. Because I know I'm probably younger than you. And I remember 6502 only came out when the Apple II came out when I was, actually it was when I was in high school. 78, 79.
Yeah, so well I was I was in high school in the 80s, so let's just say that.
In high school in the 80s? No, you weren't.
What do you mean?
I was in uni in the 80s. You're older than me. Sorry.
But no, I'm sure I graduated high school 1986.
Are you kidding me? Oh, okay.
So I'm
the opposite. Okay.
I actually don't even know how
I better
old
shut my mouth now. I graduated high school in 1980. Yeah.
Okay, right. Yeah. Anyway, so that was nice. So I put that that repo in the chat, and so that was an awesome discussion we had. So I'm interested to see how people feel about it. We should probably use it better.
So report your results on the forum with full disclosure.
Yeah, and if anybody can reproduce that, I'm going to try that again with 10.4. Now, this VM, I just fired it up after having it on the shelf for 2 years. In fact, this laptop was the last time I used it was 2020 at the last presentation. So it actually has 10.3 on it only because that's what it was when I last turned it on.
You're lucky Windows lets you use the laptop.
Wow.
Or if you had it running all day uploading it.
No, it was windy and watching updates.
Yes, well, I started up and Source Tree was didn't even the same icon.
Whenever I turn a laptop on that hasn't been on for ages, it takes me all day for it to start.
Oh yeah, no, I left it on the bench. So I turned it on at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then I started working at 7 o'clock at night. So, yeah. No, in fact, I actually left it on all day yesterday. I used my other machine and uploaded the GitHub from my machine with 10.4 on it. Actually, we can try it in 11 yet, but we can try that as well. But yeah. So I'm interested because I cannot on 10.4. If you do it if you put that variable there and you don't have that one in here, it won't even compile. It gives you a 10, 3, 8, 5
The problem
error.
is because you've got your declarations in line. I reckon
Yeah,
declarations where they ought to be.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right.
To type
It is one thing I found. So
it'll make a lot more sense. And theoretically, it won't change anything because
yeah, if you have a look here,
compiler guide.
oh man, come on. Yes, throw away anything I've got, please. So you're absolutely right. I did find that. So it doesn't do the inline directory variables correctly. Sorry, it does. It doesn't behave the same as we'd expect, but that could be correct behavior. It's just because I couldn't think straight after already working for 16 hours.
Well, the syntax checking is throwing up on them.
Yes, they are. So you see this one here, I did move it up here. And it's easier to read, but I do have this one in this scoped one inside of here though. But I could have easily put that one up.
Actually sit up above the begin, shouldn't it?
Yeah, well, you could.
I mean, it shouldn't.
Yeah, we have done it in the past that way.
As var C integer. It's just the compile, the parser.
Yeah, so this one we actually, I kind of, because I use C# a lot these days and TypeScript or whatever. You know that it's.
I don't consider that an improvement to Delphi.
No, but
And I'm amazed that anybody can maintain C# code if it's got that sort of crap in it. It's still.
yeah, that's you know, I've been on that roundabout, and I go back and go, okay, now I get it.
Defend C in this case. We've been doing that in C since 1970.
Yeah.
And it's always worked. So I got no problem.
When I went to school, there were 3 languages. There was COBOL, which was read only. There was C, which was write only, and there was Pascal, which was the read-write language.
You forgot about Fortran.
and Algol 67
I didn't do Algol 67.
and 4
Thank you.
and Lisp.
But C, you don't write in C if you want to maintain it.
Yeah, no. Well, yeah.
All the drivers and Unix are written on C. Half the world's written.
Yes, I do embedded coding,
So they do, yes.
embedded programming, and I use C all for that. And
You
yeah,
can
it's fine.
maintain C if you write it properly and document it. I've read those
Well, that's
C
why
for
you've got
years.
all these rules with C that you've got to follow. So
Yeah,
that you
it is a bit
understand the
toxic,
code.
which ones? Yeah, so I often think C is good, but Pascal's way easier. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Delphi is way easier, but you can do all the same things.
Yeah.
Maybe you take a bit of overhead with the interfacing, and not much.
You've got to realise that Windows XP was written in C. And
Yeah, just pure
that's
C.
that's a 10 million line project. And none of it was easy. Like
And
you look at some of the code, you
well.
go, my God, these guys were all geniuses, and they were.
Yeah, and the Linux kernel as well is in C,
Yeah,
not C++, C.
yeah.
In fact, Linus will reject your code out of hand if there's any C++ in it. So,
Really?
yeah, there's no C++. There's only C in.
You can't run, and they created objects effectively.
Yeah.
In XP and the NT. Oh God, by using an asynchronous tactic, that's clever shit. Is what they did, and that became what is now C++, and basically Delphi. The stuff was just, the concepts were ripped across.